The floor was not merely cold. It was a patient predator, alloy and recycled frost drawing heat out of Olivia Lee's spine, as if the deck plating had a mouth and his body was a ration it meant to finish before shift bell. The quarantine klaxon pulsed in triplets above him. 3 hard tones, a pause, 3 again, each burst vibrating through his sternum, and the loose bolts scattered under the kiosk bay. Air that should have smelled like ozone and coolant leaks carried bleach foam, hot copper, and the paper burn scent of a thermal printer running nonstop. He opened his eyes to a red status lamp strobing across the underside of pipes, to his own breath ghosting white in the draft, to a narrow strip of printout trembling from the deep scan kiosk's output slot like a tongue refusing to go back in. His left cheek stuck to the deck, skin numbed by condensation. When he peeled free, the surface left a lattice pattern on his face, and the world tilted. Then corrected. Then tilted again. For 2 beats, he could not tell whether he had blacked out from a pressure swing or somebody had dosed the ventilation. He listened. 1 set of lungs, his own. 2 fast. No boots nearby. No scrape of maintenance carts. Just klaxon, fan whine, printer chatter. He did not panic. Panic burned oxygen and options. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. He rolled to one knee, gloved hand flat on the deck until the tremor in his forearm settled from shake to buzz. Inventory came next because inventory had saved him in places where medevac never arrived. Utility belt present, 2 insulated drivers, 1 microspanner, cutter, patch gel, flex conduit pins, wrist slate cracked but live, station key card clipped, emergency ampule untouched. No blood in his mouth, no wet warmth under his jacket, boots still tied. Left shoulder angry from impact, right hip worse. He counted exits without lifting his head. Service hatch behind the kiosk, corridor ladder 20 meters east, freight lift blocked by quarantine shutters. Blind corners, 2, both with mirrored paneling that made ambush angles ugly. He mapped all of it before he stood. The kiosk screen had spiderweb cracks across the upper third where someone had dropped a wrench or a fist, but the biosensor cradle still glowed ready. Its prompt blinked in official blue, absurdly calm while the alarm screamed. Deep scan event flagged. Specimen. Lee, Olivia J. Human baseline, 99.01%. Lupine royal marker, 0.99%. Priority summons. Pack elders before dawn. He stared until the letters blurred, then sharpened again. Bad joke, he said to the empty bay, voice rough from dry throat. Whoever did this owes me 2 hours of sleep and an apology in writing. The kiosk did what kiosks did and answered without humor. Identity confirmation complete. Summons receipt required. Please place thumb on pad. He barked at one short laugh. It came out like a cough. Dock grease had stained the side seams of his hand so deeply that no solvent ever fully lifted it. Now the black streaks looked ceremonial against the scanner glass, as if he had painted himself for a ritual he had not consented to. He wiped the pad with his sleeve, checked the cable under the sensor housing, then popped the side panel open with his driver. Routine labor. Tiny screws. Familiar resistance. If he could fix something, the world might return to scale. Inside, the biosensor's contact pins had oxidized at the corners. He scraped them clean with the edge of a conduit shim, reseated the ribbon, and reset the board. The screen flickered, recalibrated, and cheerfully reissued the same red tag result in larger font. Persistent, he muttered. That's one word for it. His wrist slate buzzed against bone. Shift net message queue flooded in delayed bursts as local protocols rerouted around quarantine. Missed check-in notices, an automatic reprimand warning from deck operations, 2 curiosity pings from other technicians, and 1 direct line from Foreman Dax with the tag urgent/where are you? Olivia thumbed the call open. Dax's face jumped onto the slate in low-res blocks, all bristles and old scar tissue and irritated concern. Behind him, tool racks rattled with each pulse of the klaxon. "Lee, answer me," Dax snapped. "You ghosted at 0410 and I have medbots asking if you're horizontal." "I was horizontal. Floor and I had a disagreement." Dax squinted. "You drunk?" "Not unless disinfectant fumes ferment now." The foreman glanced off screen, listening to someone else, then lowered his voice. "Quarantine tripped because a deep scan flagged in your sector. Security locked half my crew out of Bay 12. Tell me you didn't stick your hand in the kiosk for fun." Olivia looked at the red printout still feeding itself in nervous little jerks. "Define fun." Silence. Then a slow exhale through Dax's nose. "You're not joking." "Wish I was." A metallic bang echoed through Dax's channel and someone cursed in the background. The foreman shoved his face closer to the camera. "Do not move levels. Do not touch external doors. Station law says flagged bio stays put until Marshal's escort. You hear me?" "I hear you." "Lee." Dax's expression hardened into the look he used when a junior tech reached for live voltage barehanded. "Whatever's on that scan, keep your mouth closed till council arrives. People climb over bodies for less than a fraction marker." The line cut as network priority shifted and security traffic swallowed worker channels. Olivia stared at his own reflection in the dead black of the slate. 34 sleep-starved eyes, jaw-shadowed, maintenance orange patched at both knees, a faded unit tattoo climbing his neck and disappearing under the collar. Decorated veteran in archived files, valve technician in every room that mattered. He had built a life on being ordinary enough to ignore. The printer chirped and spat a second copy. Same numbers. Same summons. He fed both slips into his jacket pocket like they might bite. Around him, the cinder ring breathed through steel lungs. Condensation dripped from overhead conduits in steady ticks. Far above maintenance deck 9, luxury wards ran cedar filters and warm spectrum lights for the high-caste packs who negotiated trade levies and blood accords over smoked tea. Down here, recycled air carried solder smoke and cheap detergent, and a man's worth was measured by whether the stabilizers stayed online during grav shear. Olivia had preferred it that way. Had quiet tools, predictable failures. Fix one thing, then the next. The klaxon pattern changed to a descending tone. Lockdown phase 2. A narrow service speaker crackled to life near the hatch. Bio-flagged individual Lee. Olivia J. Remain visible. Keep hands clear of beltline. Escort team en route. At least they used please-free language consistently. He stepped back from the kiosk into the painted square designated for quarantine holds, palms open, fingers spread. The deck vibrated with distant maglev traffic rerouted overhead, heavy enough to dust rust flakes from a support seam. He watched them fall and forced himself through another breath count. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. The ritual had started in a war corridor that smelled of burned wiring and fear sweat when he was 19, and convinced adrenaline made him immortal. A medic with tired eyes had grabbed his jaw, counted with him until his tunnel vision widened, then shoved him back into the world with a bandage and a curse. He remembered her name because he remembered everything from that day except how he survived the blast wave. Mara Lee, transfer request pending to Lupine Sector Triage. His mother had left for that posting 6 weeks later and never come home. The speaker clicked again, lower this time as if someone leaned in with muzzle close to mic. Lee, acknowledge. Acknowledged, he said. State condition. Conscious. Minor impact bruising. No respiratory distress. A pause. Paper rustled at the other end. State whether you contest scan validity. He almost answered on instinct with a sarcastic, no contest, because sarcasm was cheap armor, and he wore it well. Instead, he watched the cracked screen cast red across his knuckles and chose precision. I request full chain of custody audit on sample handling and sensor calibration. Another pause. Longer. Request logged. His pulse eased 2 notches. Whoever held the channel expected panic or denial, maybe both. Procedure, in return, bought him a sliver of ground. Bootsteps arrived first as vibrations, then sound. Synchronized, armored, not station security. 4 bodies by cadence, maybe 5, moving with the economy of trained predators who trusted each other's blind spots. The corridor lights shifted from emergency amber to authority white as transit priority granted their approach. Olivia kept his shoulders loose and his chin level. He had spent enough years around uniforms to know when fear looked like guilt from across a room. The escort rounded the corner in matte charcoal armor with silver claw insignia at the collar, visors up, eyes bright in different shades: gold, green, iron. Pack marshals, not corporate rent-a-badges. Their lead officer stopped exactly 2 meters from him and inhaled once, testing scent and truth in a manner no human protocol could replicate. Her voice came clipped, formal, and very awake. Olivia Lee. By order of the Pack Elders Convocation, you are summoned for preliminary bloodline hearing before dawn bell. You will come with us under ward transit. You are not under arrest at this phase. At this phase. He nodded once. Can I grab my toolkit? A flick of her gaze took in his belt. Keep what you carry, nothing else. Lucky for me, I sleep accessorized. One marshal's mouth twitched. The lead officer did not. She produced a thin restraint band, translucent and humming faintly. Protocol requires contact tether during transport. It limits route deviation and records vital signs. Comply. Olivia offered his wrist. The band closed with a soft click, neither painful nor gentle, and a pulse of cool current climbed his arm to the elbow. The kiosk behind him printed a final strip, then shut itself down with a sigh as if its part in the morning's disaster had concluded. He let the marshals bracket him and started walking. The maintenance deck smelled like his life: oil, hot metal, disinfectant, old coffee in forgotten cups, and every step toward the lift stripped that familiarity away. Ahead waited cedar corridors he only knew from schematics and rumor, ancient laws written for bloodlines he did not belong to, and a summons stamped in red that had taken his name and made it heavier. The dawn bell had not rung yet. The station was still between night shift and judgment. The lead marshal set the pace at a controlled stride that looked unhurried until Olivia noticed how cleanly the team cut corners and how every angle ahead was claimed before he reached it. Their boots landed in a staggered cadence designed for kill corridors, not civic hallways, and the sound bounced off the maintenance bulkheads in blunt metallic echoes. He kept his hands visible, shoulders loose, chin level, and ran the ritual again because ritual made rooms measurable. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. He tracked his breath against the klaxon's dying pulse until the alarm fell silent and only the station remained, humming through conduits like a restrained animal. They passed the freight lift he had repaired last month after a cable shear. He saw his own weld bead on the housing, ugly but reliable, and the sight grounded him more than any reassurance could have. One task done right. One thing that held under strain. He cataloged sensation and data in the same sweep. Old habits welded to old fear. Restraint band cool at his wrist. No numbness in fingers. Left shoulder tight, but serviceable. Right hip bruise, spreading heat under the fabric. Air pressure stable. No chemical sweet note that would signal gas. The marshals said nothing. He preferred it. Quiet gave him room to think. At the first security iris, a wall panel unfolded like a mechanical flower and bathed his face in pale green scanlight. The lead marshal did not look at him when she spoke. Her eyes stayed on a side display that mirrored his vital signs in clean white traces. Pulse elevated, descending. Keep it descending. Working on it. Do not joke with the elders. Wasn't planning stand-up at dawn. That almost smile returned to the younger marshal on his right, then vanished as the iris opened with a hydraulic hiss and a pressure pop that pinched Olivia's ears. They entered a transit shaft he had only seen on restricted schematics, a vertical throat of polished steel and carbon bracing with emergency ladders tucked behind armored glass. The car waiting for them was not the cargo platform workers called a coffin with handles. It was a ward capsule, matte black, seals triple gasketed, air independent. He stepped inside and the floor flexed microscopically under his weight to calibrate passenger mass. The doors shut. Sound thinned to filtered breath and faint motor vibration. Enclosure hit him low and fast, memory crawling up from places he kept bolted. A troop carrier with fire in the vents, 4 men coughing in smoke, a hatch that would not cycle. His lungs tried to sprint. He stopped them with numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Out slow, not sharp, because sharp edges turn breathing into panic and panic into mistakes. The restraint band pulsed once, reading him. The lead marshal glanced over. You have combat conditioning. He focused on the seam where door met wall. Used to. It does not look former. Neither does this morning. Her ears tipped back a fraction, not insult, more calculation. You requested chain of custody audit instead of contest. Why? Because contest sounded emotional, and emotional got filed as instability in systems built by people who never had to prove they were calm. Because if the scan was wrong, he needed records intact, and if it was right, he needed records even more. He gave her the shorter version. Procedure survives mood swings. Acceptable answer. The capsule rose. Gravity tug shifted twice as it crossed load transfer rings. Olivia swallowed through the pressure change and kept his gaze moving, never darting, just measuring. Marshal left rear carried a sidearm configured for tranquilizing large-bodied species. Visible cartridge tin looked amber green. Marshal front right had a shock baton with legal seals still intact, no scrape on the emitter, meaning she maintained gear personally or feared inspection enough to fake it well. Their armor bore cedar smoke residue at the shoulders, fresh from upper wards. Pack marshals, yes, but also court-facing detail. This escort was not routine. The lift stopped at an intermediate lock. Doors opened to a decon vestibule where mist nozzles dropped ionized vapor that smelled like rain on hot wire and bitter herbs. He flinched once when cold struck his neck. Nobody commented. A wall speaker issued doctrinal language in a neutral contralto. Transit Subject Lee, Olivia J. You are under provisional ward protection pending elder intake. You retain right to accurate record, counsel request, and medical stabilization. You are not authorized unsupervised movement or private data transmission. Olivia cleared his throat. Can I notify employer I'm alive and not stealing copper? The lead marshal considered, then tapped her wrist console. 30 seconds monitored. She extended his slate after routing it through her unit. He opened Dax's thread and thumbed a text. Concise and useful because panic messages multiplied problems. Alive. In ward transit under elder summons. Not detained under criminal code. Cover my valve rounds on 9 and lock my bench drawer. I owe you coffee for a month. A reply hit before the marshal reclaimed the slate. Bench locked. Coffee for a year. Keep your head in your paperwork. Outcome logged. Contact closed. One fewer loose end. They moved again, this time into a horizontal corridor where the materials changed from raw utility steel to brushed composite in warm tones that pretended not to be armor. Cedar musk rode the ventilation now, layered over sterilant and polished stone. The smell profile was deliberate, Olivia realized, a broadcast of controlled wilderness for residents who wanted tradition without dirt. His boots, scuffed and stained at the toe, sounded too loud on the softer floor. No worker traffic crossed their path. Doorways remained closed as they passed, but privacy glass darkened a second too late in 2 suites, enough for him to catch silhouettes pausing behind it, heads angling in synchronized curiosity. By the time they cleared the 3rd checkpoint, 21 minutes remained before dawn bell. His pulse had settled into functional range. That was the first victory. He held to it while the station around him transformed from labor anatomy into court architecture. Walls widened. Ceiling ribs curved like the inside of a predator's ribcage, all elegance and implied teeth. Light shifted from blue-white utility strips to amber sconces set in carved housings that looked hand-worked, expensive, and entirely unnecessary on a spinning habitat where every gram was budgeted. Every design choice said rank. Every meter upward cost someone below. At checkpoint 4, a clerk in dove-gray protocol robes waited behind a transparent desk grown from single-pour resin. She was lupine too, older, fur gone silver around the muzzle, eyes bright as polished brass. She did not address him first. She addressed the lead marshal by title and code string, then scanned Olivia with a narrow wand that clicked as it passed his pockets. Declared items, she said. 2 print slips, 1 wrist slate, 1 key card, standard maintenance belt tools, the marshal replied. The clerk's nostrils flared slightly at his jacket. Worker bay residue exceeds etiquette threshold for Cedar Corridor. Olivia blinked. I can roll in grease or I can roll in fear, ma'am. Grease was available. One of the marshals made a strangled noise that might have been a laugh with military discipline applied to it. The clerk looked at him for a long second, then entered a notation on her panel. Statement recorded as stress humor. No penalty. Bureaucracy with a sense of taxonomy. He almost respected it. She slid a thin data wafer across to the lead marshal. Preliminary threat advisories. Adjudicator Office has petitioned immediate sequestration under Purity Statute 9. The words landed like a dropped wrench. Olivia kept his face neutral and filed the data. Petition submitted already, before he arrived, which meant somebody had prepped language for his existence as a legal object, not a person. The lead marshal signed receipt with a thumbprint and tucked the wafer into her vambrace slot. Ward right precedence remains active, she said. Contested, the clerk answered. Contestation logged, not granted. Understood. There it was. Social threat map rendered in 12 clip syllables. Lines of force. Active pressure points. He did not need full legal training to read it. One faction wanted him isolated. Another wanted him protected. And the argument was running faster than his feet could carry him. They resumed transit through an atrium open to a viewport that showed Cinder Ring's inner curvature and the station lights arcing away like a necklace of embers around darkness. Maintenance decks were invisible from here. So were the people who kept the oxygen dry in the gravity stable. A fountain in the center of the atrium circulated filtered water over black stone in a pattern that mimicked mountain runoff. 2 juveniles in formal sashes stood with an instructor near the railing, reciting civic code in a low chant. When they saw the escort and the human in the middle, the instructor rotated them smoothly, presenting their backs in controlled politeness. Not hostility, not welcome. A taut behavior designed to avoid contaminating ritual with unsanctioned gaze. Institutional rule noted. Even children were trained to treat bloodline anomalies as hazardous protocol. Olivia's jaw tightened. He released it before it locked. He had known class walls all his life, but this was different from wage contempt or sector snobbery. This was ontology with uniforms, ancestry reduced to access badges, and law poised to decide what his body meant for people he had never met. He kept walking. At the final gate, before elder intake, the corridor narrowed again, intentionally, forcing single-file entry past twin columns etched with old pack script. A pair of honor guards in ceremonial armor stood motionless except for breathing, helmets open, fangs visible without threat. Behind them, a translucent screen displayed rotating notices in 3 languages and 1 scent code stream he could not parse. He read what he could. Convocation pre-dawn docket. Item 1. Bloodline verification, provisional item. 2. Ward jurisdiction challenge, pending item. 3. Security advisory, restricted. No names, just functions. People translated into agenda. The lad marshal turned to face him fully for the first time since the maintenance deck. Up close, he saw scar tissue crossing the bridge of her nose, pale against dark fur, the kind left by close-quarter shrapnel or claw. Veteran reading veteran. From this point, she said, you speak when addressed unless counsel prompts. You do not touch any elder dais surface. You do not accept scent mark cloth or blood chalice if offered before status is determined. He lifted an eyebrow. That second one was already off my social calendar. Her mouth tightened, maybe suppressing irritation, maybe another almost smile. You use humor as armor. Keep it thin in there. They cut through thick. He nodded. Understood. She keyed the restraint band and it loosened by a millimeter, still locked, but with enough slack to signal a change from transport custody to formal ward presentation. Small gesture, large meaning. Not prisoner, not free. Something in between and officially named. Behind the gate, muffled voices rose and fell in disciplined waves, old authority negotiating new disruption. Cedar, stone dust, ozone from active projectors, the faint metallic thread of stressed circuitry. Every smell layered into a warning he could not yet translate. Olivia took one more measured breath and ran the ritual without moving his lips, not because he was afraid of fainting or shouting, but because control was the only inheritance he fully trusted. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Then the gate seals disengaged with a sound like a blade leaving a sheath, and the marshals walked him into the heart of the upper wards, where the station's social gravity finally showed its true weight. The chamber threshold was not merely guarded, it was curated, every meter engineered to remind a body where it ranked. Polished black stone underfoot, cedar oil in the vents, low bronze chimes hidden in the arch. So each entrant arrived wrapped in ritual sound whether they believed in ritual or not. Olivia crossed between the honor guards and felt the weight of watching settle over his shoulders before he identified faces. A pressure like standing under a crane hook while somebody argued about load limits. The convocation hall opened in concentric tiers around a central floor of inlaid metal. Wolfpack sigils worked into conductive veins that glowed dim amber under transparent lacquer. Elders occupied raised seats with narrow desks and private holopanes, their robes layered in clan colors so muted they read as shadow until they moved. Attendants in gray slipped along the perimeter carrying tablets, water flasks, sealed packets. 2 legal projectors hovered at shoulder height near the central dais, lenses already warm. He smelled ionization from active fields, an old paper from physical archives, an odd pairing that made the place feel less like a courtroom and more like a shrine forced to modernize. A cluster of officials stood to the left of the main speaking ring. He recognized nobody by face, but rank coding was a language of shape and metal, and one figure read as danger immediately. Tall male lupine, fur dark as wet slate, adjudicator's collar chain in white gold links, expression composed to the point of cruelty. High Adjudicator Varkesh did not have to announce himself. People around him arranged their breathing to his rhythm. Varkesh's gaze fixed on Olivia with clinical interest, not surprise. Prepared language sat in that stillness. Prepared outcome, too. The lead marshal stepped half a pace ahead and delivered him in formal cadence. Transit subject Lee, Olivia J. Present under provisional ward protection pending bloodline verification and jurisdictional ruling. Protection contested, Varkesh said, voice carrying without effort. Subject identity is unstable and may constitute cross-lineage fraud. Sequestration is warranted before chamber contamination. Olivia almost looked behind him to check whether there was a second subject. Contamination. He kept his face blank and his hands open at his sides. The restraint band at his wrist hummed once, sampling pulse. An elder with iron-gray fur tapped her desk for order. Adjudicator, contest is noted. You will not argue sequence out of docket. I argue risk, Varkesh replied. Purity Statute 9 authorizes immediate containment where tampering indicators exceed threshold. He touched his panel, and a hollow pane bloomed above the speaking ring, red text scrolling over an anonymized genomic graph that was anonymous in form and unmistakable in target. Olivia watched his own fractions rotate in public air like market data. Human baseline, royal marker, probability bands. If he had not been standing in the middle of it, he would have admired the rendering quality. The hall doors sealed behind him with a hydraulic thud. Sound tightened. Then a new set of footsteps entered from a side access Olivia had not seen, slow and unhurried, and somehow louder than everyone who had rushed before. Conversation thinned to silence in ripples. Even Varkesh shifted his weight a fraction. Commander Ryra Kaur moved into view as if the room had been built to frame her, and resented every prior occupant for pretending otherwise. She was larger than any marshal in the chamber. Silver fur braided tight along one side of her head and left loose at the shoulder on the other, rank claws mounted at her collar in matte obsidian, old scar lines crossing one forearm where ceremonial lacquer had failed to hide them. Her uniform carried combat cut rather than court drape. Dark fabric pulled close for motion. No jewelry except a single signet ring that looked less decorative than sanctioned. The stories Olivia had heard in maintenance bars were suddenly too small. War heroine, border butcher, pack shield, pack storm, half myth, half warning label, depending who paid for drinks. In person, she looked like a commander who had survived too many meetings where people with soft hands authorized hard deaths. Her eyes landed on him and did not blink. She crossed the floor in 5 long strides, stopped inside his personal space, and inhaled once near his throat with blunt territorial audacity. The move was intimate only if stripped of context. In context, it was a dominance check performed in front of every power broker on Cinderring. Before Olivia could decide whether to stand still or duck, she drove him backward with one forearm across his chest and pinned him against the biometric gate column at the chamber edge, metal kissing his shoulder blades through jacket fabric. Gasps flicked around the tiers. One attendant dropped a stylus. Ryra's voice came low enough for him and the nearest microphones, all blade and control. "Do not speak until I finish." He held her gaze and gave the smallest nod he could manage, with her arm braced like a bulkhead. Varkesh stepped forward, satisfied predator calm in every line. "Commander Kor acknowledges hazard. Record her physical detainment of the subject as concurrence with sequestration necessity." Ryra did not turn toward him. Her forearm pressure eased by a degree that told Olivia she had never needed force to hold him. She had needed optics. "Record accurately," she said. "I invoked first ward right by touch under Covenant Ash, Clause 12. Newly identified blood enters my personal protection at first contact. Your sequestration petition is void pending my review." The words hit the room like decompression. 3 elders spoke at once. The iron-gray elder from before slammed her palm on the desk for silence. "Confirm citation." Ryra finally angled her head toward the dais. Covenant Ash, Clause 12, ratified after the Fenris famine disputes, reaffirmed in post-war protocol revisions. First-ranking blooded officer to make direct claim assumes custodial duty until dawn adjudication. Duty includes safety, medical stabilization, and anti-coercion guarantee. Varkesh's lips thinned. That covenant predates mixed species genomic drift. "It predates your office too," Ryra said, "yet both remain legally inconvenient." A suppressed sound moved through the chamber, not laughter exactly, more the collective exhale of people who enjoyed seeing precision weaponized against arrogance. Olivia felt the restraint band register his pulse spike and then settle. This was the feared counterpart. Yes, but fear and relief had arrived in the same body, which was a non-trivial thing to process while pinned to a column in front of aristocrats. Varkesh recovered quickly. "Commander, your command portfolio presents conflict. You are line heir and active military. Custodial bias is self-evident." "Bias is universal," Ryra answered. "Procedure exists to channel it. You may challenge at dawn table. You may not disappear a worker before sunrise because his genome embarrassed your doctrine." She stepped back at last. Space returned at a rush. Olivia realized his hands had stayed open the whole time, fingers numb from tension. An elder with pale eyes scanned both of them. "Transit Subject Lee, do you accept Commander Kor's provisional ward protection?" Every gaze in the room swung to him. The crux was brutally simple. Choose the terrifying commander who had just used him as legal leverage, or fall into the adjudicator's containment box and trust systems that had already labeled him a contaminant. Trade-offs did not come cleaner. Olivia cleared his throat. "I accept provisional ward protection." "Entered," the clerk at side desk said. Varkesh lifted his chin. "Then I demand immediate neutral custody transfer to my office for evidentiary isolation pending dawn." Ryra bared no teeth, but the air around her tightened anyway. "Denied. Ward right grants location discretion to the custodian. He remains with me." "Your quarters are not certified containment." "My command cabin is certified against boarding action and biochemical leak. Your office fails both metrics from last quarter's audit." That landed. 2 elders checked their pains at once. Varkesh's ears flattened. Then reset, as if the reaction had never happened. The iron-gray elder issued the ruling with exhausted authority. Provisional finding. Covenant Ash remains binding until full repeal. Commander Kor retains temporary ward custody of Subject Lee through dawn convocation. Subject will be present for docket item 1 and 2. Adjudicator Varkesh may submit objections in writing within 1 bell. Martial detail remains assigned. A chime marked the decision. Olivia did not let himself sag with relief. Relief was when people missed the next trap. Ryra rotated toward him again, close enough that he could see fatigue under her eyes despite immaculate posture. Not weakness. Depletion. Neural overstress, maybe, or simple sleep debt carried too long. Her scent held cedar and cold metal and the sharp ozone note of recently discharged biofeedback tech. She noticed him noticing, and her expression shut 1 notch. "You move with me now," she said. Not request, not threat, operational fact. "With pleasure," Olivia said, then added because his mouth had always outrun prudence under pressure, or at least with paperwork-compliant enthusiasm. One marshal coughed into her fist to hide a laugh. Ryra's gaze stayed flat for a beat, and then the corner of her mouth shifted by a millimeter. "Save your humor for hallways. Elders bruise easily." "Copy that, Commander." By the time they reached the side exit, Dawnbell sat 16 minutes out according to the corridor chronometer. 2 gray-robed aides fell in behind with tablets and sealed evidence envelopes. A court medic tried to intercept with a scanner wand. Ryra dismissed him with a look and a citation code. Varkesh did not follow, but his voice reached them anyway from the chamber floor, iron-wrapped in silk. "This will be reviewed, Commander." Without turning, Ryra answered, "Everything is reviewed. That is why records matter." The side door sealed between them with a heavy click. The private transit corridor beyond was narrower than the public hall and colder by at least 3 degrees, intentional for alertness or intimidation. Utility conduits ran visible along one wall beneath clear armor, coolant pulsing blue through braided lines. Olivia tracked the flow automatically and saw a pressure flutter in one segment that would become somebody's emergency by next week. His brain wanted to stop and fix it. His life currently ranked elsewhere. Ryra keyed a black cabin door marked Command Transit, Restricted Ward. The panel scanned her palm, then flashed amber at Olivia's restraint band before unlocking. Inside, the cabin looked less like a royal lounge and more like a hardened bridge module. Crash couches with 5-point harnesses, fold-out tactical table, med drawer, encrypted comm stack, 2 emergency breather masks clipped by the hatch, 1 compact shrine shelf with a carved wooden wolf and a chipped unit coin beside it. Personal and military in uneasy truce. The door shut behind them, seals engaging with a double thump that cut off corridor noise. For the first time since maintenance deck, there were no spectators except 1 marshal at the interior post and an AI eye in the ceiling dome, blinking passive blue. Olivia glanced around once, then sat where indicated. The restraint band disengaged from transit mode and relatched to a docking ring beside his seat, giving him arm range, but no path to the door. He breathed out through his nose. "Great. I came to fix coolant valves and got adopted by constitutional law." The interior marshal failed to suppress it this time and snorted outright. Even the AI emitted a polite tone that might have been its approximation of amusement. Ryra remained standing, braced with one hand on the table edge, while the cabin decoupled from station track and began a smooth lateral glide toward her command sector. "You were not adopted," she said. "You were claimed under emergency statute." "Right," Comforting distinction. It is accurate. Accuracy and comfort rarely share a bunk. That earned him a direct look, assessing rather than hostile. You choose words like a mechanic chooses spare parts. Functional, minimal, usually sharp. Better than decorative and fragile. Sometimes decorative parts are load-bearing, she said, almost to herself. Silence held for 3 seconds, thick with unsaid calculations. The marshal at post pretended to study her wrist display. Ryra tapped a control and a privacy screen rose between them and the marshal in translucent smoke glass. Enough for protocol modesty, not enough for complete secrecy. State your objective, Olivia Lee. Not your current fear. Your objective before this scan. He hesitated. She caught it. You requested chain of custody, she continued. A dock worker under shock does not default to evidentiary language unless trained or motivated. Which is it? Both, he said. Training old, motivation personal. Specify. He watched the coolant line vibration through the transparent wall for one breath, then decided partial truth would fail faster than full. I've been searching war transfer archives for my mother. Mara Lee. Medic. Reassigned to Lupine Sector Triage 20 years ago. File trail breaks after Cinder Armistice, Q2. Every records desk says sealed, lost, or above my pay grade. I kept pulling maintenance access on obsolete servers when I had downtime. He gave a small, humorless shrug. Apparently, my hobbies just upgraded. Ryra's expression changed in increments. Hard command edges still there, but focus, deepening. A reframing he could almost feel. Mara Lee, she repeated, testing the name against memory. Unit marker? Field patch had a white bar over blue circle. I can pull serial if you give me a terminal not older than the station. I know the patch. Her voice went flatter. Border Casualty Stabilization Corps. They treated wolves and humans without caste triage during the retreat years. That sounds like her. The cabin lights shifted as it entered a secured tunnel, amber to red for 5 seconds, then back to neutral. Outside, armored shutters slid past in measured intervals like ribs closing around them. Ryra moved to a side cabinet and took out a compact gauntlet assembly, matte black with silver contact nodes along the inner wrist. She set it on the table, and his technician eye caught the issue immediately. Microfracture at the flex seam. Stress scoring near the neural pickup band. One capacitor housing discolored from heat. She saw him see it. Do not touch, she said. Wasn't reaching. You were calculating. Occupational hazard. She fitted the gauntlet onto her left arm anyway and cinched the strap with one sharp pull. It regulates neural spillover from old injury. During hearings, I require stable control. As if summoned by acknowledgement, a faint tremor ran through her hand and vanished. She pressed 2 fingers to the gauntlet housing until the tremor eased. Not dramatic, not performative, just work. The kind done quietly so others could keep pretending commanders were made of stone. Olivia kept his tone neutral. That seems failing under load. I am aware. Awareness doesn't solder contacts. Her eyes flashed. And unsolicited repair advice from ward subjects does not improve discipline. Fair. Another silence. Then she exhaled, long and controlled. Also fair. By the time the cabin approached her command berth, 6 minutes remained before dawn bell. Temporal data pulsed on the wall display beside route status and air composition readouts. Oxygen normal. Contaminants none. External access locked. Ryra lowered herself into the seat opposite him, posture still formal but less weaponized. You will stay in my ward suite until convocation recall. You will answer direct questions. You will not wander. If you need water, food, or medical support, you ask the marshal and you receive it. If Varkesh's office contacts you directly, you do not respond without me present." "Understood." She studied him one more time, this time with the same precision he used on damaged machinery. "You are either very brave or very tired." Mostly caffeinated by fear. The almost smile returned. Quicker now. "Good. Fear keeps people attentive." The cabin docked with a deep mechanical clunk, followed by 3 locking pings. Outside, command deck air leaked in at the seals, carrying colder cedar and faint electrical rain. The door remained closed while authentication cycled through 6 levels. Olivia watched the indicators climb and felt the new equilibrium settle, unstable, but real. He was no longer being dragged by procedures he didn't understand. He was inside one powerful woman's protection radius, which might save him, use him, or both. The final lock turned green. Ryra stood and keyed the hatch. "Welcome to Ward Core, Olivia Lee," she said. "Try not to break anything I cannot replace." He rose, flexed the hand not tethered, and managed a thin grin that felt like borrowed equipment. "No promises, Commander. I'm maintenance. We improve systems by offending them first." The hatch irised open on a room that smelled of cedar, solder flux, and the bitter citrus of medical disinfectant. A command suite built by someone who trusted bulkheads more than decor, and then let tradition drape itself over the armor. Floor panels were matte black, with grip texture along the traffic lines. One wall held tactical displays asleep behind smoked glass. Another carried shelves of physical binders labeled in lupine script and station code, their edges worn by actual hands instead of archive drones. A narrow bunk sat untouched, blanket folded to regulation angles sharp enough to cut. The only softness in the room was a low wool throw abandoned on a chair beside an active heater. Ryra stepped through first, and the marshal at the inner post snapped to attention. "Commander." "Perimeter lock," she said. "No visitors without my voice key. If convocation pings, route to room channel." "Yes, Commander." The door sealed behind Olivia with 3 clean clicks. His restraint band disengaged from transit tether and shifted to local monitor mode, a faint green ring replacing amber. Not free, but breathing room. He took 1 pace in and stopped where a yellow floor mark indicated guest hold. Ward suite or not, there were lines here you did not cross until invited. Ryra moved to the central table, braced both hands against the edge, and lowered her head for 1 measured breath. For the first time since the chamber, the performance dropped a fraction. Her shoulders stayed squared, but the muscles at the base of her neck twitched in an irregular rhythm that did not match tension alone. She reached for the gauntlet clasp at her wrist, missed, tried again, and got it on the 3rd attempt. Olivia clocked the sequence and filed it beside the tremor he had already seen, the ozone scent from overheated contacts, the way her pupils had narrowed during Varkesh's challenge and failed to widen back promptly. Neural overrun, maybe pain gating, maybe both. He knew the look from old barracks corridors where veterans pretended they were fine until their hands betrayed them. "Water," she said without looking up. The marshal crossed to a dispenser and set a steel cup by her elbow. Ryra did not drink. She pressed 2 fingers against the gauntlet seam and closed her eyes as a faint vibration rattled the table legs. The room's AI eye brightened from passive blue to attentive violet. "Commander," the AI said in calm contralto, "biofeedback variance exceeds baseline by 23%. Recommend seated stabilization protocol." "Recommendation acknowledged," Ryra replied through her teeth. "Deferred." Deferral logged. Olivia kept his voice low. You want me out in the corridor for this? Her eyes opened, silver and hard again. No. She straightened, found the clasp and peeled the gauntlet off in one controlled motion that looked almost casual until a bead of sweat tracked down her temple. Without the device, a fine tremor traveled from wrist to fingertips, fast as hummingbird wings. You stay where I can account for you. That's a sentence with trust issues. That's a sentence with experience. 1 minute passed in procedural quiet. While she ran a breathing cadence he recognized even through species differences. Inhale with shoulder expansion. Hold past comfort. Exhale slower than instinct. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. The same old rope across different storms. When the tremor settled from violent to manageable, she finally took the water and drank. By the time the wall chronometer ticked to 0552 station, Dawn Bell sat 8 minutes out. Ryra set the cup down and looked at him as if deciding whether he was a witness or a risk. You saw weakness in the cabin. I saw a damaged medical interface. You saw my hand shaking in front of a human worker and a marshal. I saw a commander keep control while her equipment fought her. The marshal by the door kept his gaze fixed on the far wall, professional enough to pretend deafness. Ryra watched Olivia for another beat, then tapped the table. A hollow pane unfolded between them, text lines cascading in legal and medical script. He caught fragments. Border action. Year 11. Cortical scarring. Sleep fracture index. Fertility status. Secured lineage priority. She noticed where his eyes stopped. There. That is the part the chamber pretends not to stare at. Olivia said nothing. I am the last fertile heir of Coraline, she continued, clipped and unsentimental. 3 cousins dead in war. 1 sterile from radiation therapy. 1 renounced claim and disappeared into outer contracts. Pack law says succession must remain biologically traceable through designated blood channels during accord season. Varkesh calls that cultural continuity. I call it a polite cage. The words hit with the force of machinery finally stripped of its decorative paneling. The feared war heroine reframed in one sentence. Not untouchable predator, but strategic asset pinned by custom, command, and her own body's legal value. He pushes purity statute because it narrows options, Olivia said. He pushes it because narrowed options are easier to own. Her ears angled back, not in threat, in disgust. If your marker had entered his custody first, he would have branded you contraband lineage data, then petitioned reproductive trusteeship over me on grounds of blood instability in the sector. A single ruling could have moved my command authority to a council and my person to supervised residence. She gave a humorless exhale. All very constitutional. The marshal shifted at that jaw tightening. So even staff knew the stakes and hated saying them aloud. Olivia rubbed his thumb against a grease stain on his index finger, a small, grounding habit. That why you looked like you hadn't slept in a month? 2 months. Ryra's answer came instantly, as if precision itself were a shield. Average, uninterrupted sleep. 1 hour, 42 minutes. Neural scar tissue amplifies sensory load under stress. Crowds become static storms. Scent layers become knives. I maintain function with protocol, medication, and this gauntlet when it behaves. And when it doesn't? I improvise and pretend the room is not spinning. Her gaze flicked to the untouched bunk, then back. Predators are allowed pain in private as long as they bleed competence in public. It was not self-pity. It was a field report from behind the armor. The AI spoke again, cautious. Commander, Dawn prep packet from Elder Clerks is queued. Display. A second pane opened with convocation sequence, speaking order, and objections submitted. Varkesh's name appeared 6 times in 8 entries. Ryra scanned it in seconds, jaw tight, then closed the pane with a flat palm. Olivia heard himself ask, "You got anyone in your corner besides legal text and stubbornness?" Ryra's expression shifted, almost puzzled by the question. "A few. Not enough for comfort, enough for math." She nodded toward the marshal. "Terran served under me at the Kilid breach. He trusts results. Elder Sorev trusts records. Clerk Naral trusts process. That is my coalition." "Blue-collar coalition," Olivia muttered. "People who've watched systems fail up close." A faint huff escaped her, nearest thing to a laugh he had heard from her. "Your class analysis is impertinent. Also accurate." "Also accurate," she conceded. She set the gauntlet on the table between them. "Now, the practical issue. It failed twice during transit. I have backup cuffs, but they blunt motor control and slow reaction time. Convocation demands precision. You identified seam damage in under 2 seconds. Can you repair this without frying my median nerve?" There was the pivot. Vulnerability stated, then immediately translated into task and risk. Olivia stepped to the table only when she tilted her chin in permission. He turned the gauntlet in his hands, feeling the warmth left from her skin, the roughness where composite had cracked, the slight wobble in the neural pickup ring. Up close, the damage was worse than he thought. One microcapacitor had heat bloom on the casing, and a trace line near the flex point had lifted from the substrate. "I can stabilize it," he said. "Proper rebuild needs bench tools and 2 hours. We've got neither. We have 6 minutes. Then we do dockyard surgery." He glanced up. "Need your consent on record. I touch this and it goes wrong. You could seize or lose hand function for the hearing window." Ryra met his eyes. No theatrics. "Consent granted. Recorded." The AI chimed. "Consent token archived." Olivia unrolled his tool wrap on the table. Insulated driver, microspanner, 2 conduit pins, patch gel, filament tape, contact cleaner ampule, maintenance deck jewelry. He loved it on sight. "Marshal," he said, still looking at the device. "I need a sterile wipe and a light source that isn't mood lighting." Terran moved fast, returning with med wipes and a portable inspection lamp from the cabinet. "Anything else?" "Yeah. If I swear at this thing, it's at the circuitry, not your commander." "Understood." Ryra sat opposite him and laid her forearm on the table, palm up, giving him access to fit checks once the internal work began. Trust arrived in mechanics before emotion. He respected that. He popped the gauntlet housing and exposed the inner board. Burnt polymer and ozone curled up, sharp enough to sting the sinuses. One contact node had carbon scoring. Another floated loose, its solder joint cracked clean through. "Who serviced this last?" he asked. Ryra answered without hesitation. "Command Medtech 12 days ago." He signed off a fracture and left a floating node. Her ears flattened. "Name?" "Talon Reeve," Terran supplied, already checking his wrist log. "Flag is cert for audit," Ryra said. "Queued." External contact introduced and answered in the same breath. One thread tied down. Olivia swabbed the board with cleaner scraped carbon with the edge of his spanner and bridged the broken trace using a shaved conduit pin flattened with plier pressure from his multi-tool. Not elegant, functional. He anchored the patch with filament tape and a bead of quick cure gel, then used the inspection lamp to check for reflective breaks. "Power test," he said. Ryra keyed the gauntlet. It hummed to life, then stuttered, a high whine spiking toward feedback. "Off," Olivia snapped. She killed it immediately. "Capacitor 2's unstable, need a donor." He looked around. No parts bin, no spare cuff open, no time. His eyes landed on the table's holoprojector base. Same voltage class on auxiliary coil, not medical grade, but clean enough if he isolated it. Commander, I'm about to cannibalize your conference table. Will it survive? Probably. Then offend it. He grinned despite himself and cracked the projector panel with Terran's authorization code. The AI announced, mildly scandalized, "Warning. Component extraction may reduce presentation fidelity by 40%. Good, Olivia said. If elders can't read tiny footnotes, they might talk less. Terran made a noise that was definitely laughter this time. Olivia pulled the auxiliary capacitor, trimmed leads with his cutter, and seated it into the gauntlet board, reinforcing with patch gel and a loop of filament around the mount posts. He resealed the housing, then looked up. Fit test. Slow. Ryra slid her arm into the gauntlet. He tightened the strap one notch, then another, fingers steady. Tell me when pressure crosses pain. Still acceptable. He activated the unit at low output. A soft, blue pulse traveled along the contact nodes. Her hand tremored once, then stabilized. Breathing cadence, he said. She gave him a look that might have objected to taking instruction, then complied. In 4. Hold 4. Out 4. He matched her without comment and watched the waveform on the gauntlet's tiny status strip even out from jagged peaks to controlled arcs. Raise to operational, he said. She increased output. No whine, no spike. Motor response clean through all fingers. She flexed once, hard, then rotated her wrist. The gauntlet held. Terran exhaled like he had been bracing for impact. The AI returned to passive blue. Ryra turned her hand over, studying the steadiness as if it were an unfamiliar luxury. You built a medical patch from a table and scrap pins. From high-quality scrap pins, Olivia said. I have standards. Her gaze lifted to his face, and this time the reframing ran both directions. He was no longer just legal anomaly in worker boots. He was a technician who could keep a commander functional when certified systems failed. In a station built on hierarchy, competence was its own dialect of power. The wall comm chimed with elder priority tone. Terran answered. Ward Core. Convocation recall in 2 minutes, the clerk's voice said. All principals to chamber. Received. Ryra stood, flexed her repaired hand once more, and nodded to Olivia with formal precision that felt more intimate than gratitude speeches. You just altered today's odds. He packed his tools in 3 fast motions. I like odds that include breathing. She keyed the hatch. Cedar-cold air spilled in from the corridor, carrying the metallic hum of waking institutions and the distant bronze note of the first dawn bell beginning to ring. The second note of the dawn bell rolled down Ward Core's corridor like bronze through water, and the command deck shifted around it. Doors unlocking in sequence, staff stepping into motion, the station's aristocratic heartbeat sinking to ritual time. Ryra moved first, gauntlet quiet and steady at her wrist, uniform collar straight as a blade. Olivia matched her pace half a step behind and to the left where Ward protocol placed him, while Terran took rear position with enough distance to look respectful and enough proximity to break a bone if procedure required it. Cold cedar air flowed over Olivia's face each time a pressure door opened. Under it, he caught stressed circuitry, machine oil from hidden servos, and the faint iron bite of too many bodies preparing to argue law before sunrise. His own pulse ticked high and controlled. The repaired gauntlet had changed the geometry between him and Ryra in a way everyone could see now. She had asked for help. He had delivered. In court space, utility was a kind of intimacy. At the first intersection, two elder aides in pale ash robes approached with tablets held flat at chest level. Both bowed to Ryra, then angled toward Olivia with bureaucratic caution, like men approaching an unfamiliar animal that had passed inspection, but still might bite. "Commander Core," the taller aide said, "Adjudicator Office has renewed request for temporary separation of the transit subject during preliminary docket calibration. Neutral waiting alcove has been prepared." Ryra did not slow. "Denied. Renewal includes Elder Seal from Desk 3. Desk 3 may challenge on record, not in a hallway." The shorter aide tried a different vector, eyes flicking to Olivia's restraint band. "Subject comfort is a consideration. Chamber preamble can run long. Separate seating reduces social pressure and scent overload." Olivia almost laughed at the sudden concern for his comfort. Ryra answered before he could weaponize sarcasm. "His comfort is my responsibility under Covenant Ash." Her tone stayed even, but she reached across the narrow space between them and took hold of the local tether clasp at his wrist, unclipped it from idle loop, and locked it directly to a magnetic anchor on her own belt. A soft double click confirmed pair link. "Record this as active custodial contact." Both aides froze for half a beat, then hurried to update their tablets. The gesture was procedural. It was also a claim. Warmth from her palm lingered through his sleeve seam for a second longer than protocol required. Olivia kept his expression neutral while his brain cataloged implications at technical speed. Paired tether meant no one could legally move him without physically moving her. Any bio-event on his band pinged her gauntlet in real time. If he bolted, her system logged it as custodial failure and political ammunition. Trust and risk in one hardware connection. By the time they reached the chamber-antechamber, the third note of dawn bell had faded, and the corridor clocks flipped to 0600 station. A line of attendants waited beside a lacquered table set with scent-neutral cloths, water vials, and ceremonial archive chips. Ryra ignored the cloths, took one water vial, handed it to Olivia without looking at him, and keyed open a side panel in the wall. "Drink," she said. He did. The water was mineral-heavy and cold enough to ache in his teeth. "Tastes like melted coins." "It is fortified for hearing endurance." "Luxury." Her ears angled in brief amusement. "Your sarcasm remains operational." "Recently serviced." A junior marshal hurried in with a sealed message strip and passed it to Taryn, who scanned, stepped forward, and addressed Ryra in low, formal cadence. "Audit Office acknowledged your flag. Medtech Talon Reeve has been pulled from active cert pending review. Backup Armory confirms no other compromised gauntlets in your command inventory." One thread closed cleanly. Ryra nodded once. "Good." Olivia caught himself exhaling. The chamber had dozens of ways to kill a person socially, legally, economically. Knowing one hidden failure point had been removed mattered more than he expected. Ryra turned toward him and held out her hand, palm up, not command flat, but invitation open. "Your right wrist," he offered it. She slid a narrow strip of black conductive cloth under his restraint band, adjusted the fit with careful fingers, and sealed it so the monitor sat snug without chafing. Her knuckles brushed his pulse point, steady despite the crowd and the coming hearing. "Your vitals spiked during transit whenever the band shifted," she said quietly. "This will reduce noise in the telemetry." "Thanks. I do not need false distress alerts in the middle of objections." "Still counts as thanks." Her gaze lifted to his, direct and unarmored for one beat. "Then you may count it." That was the bond signal, clear as any oath in the room. Not romance, not softness, but accepted dependency under pressure. Two people choosing to be legible to each other when the institution wanted both of them abstracted into legal categories. A chime from the chamber door announced principal entry. Attendants parted. Taryn stepped to Olivia's other side. Ryra did not release the tether. Inside, the convocation hall had brightened from pre-dawn amber to formal white, and every surface looked sharper for it. Elders sat at full docket positions. Varkesh stood at his desk with 3 legal clerks and a data spine connected to the chamber vault. He watched Ryra escort Olivia to the central ring with paired tether visible, and something predatory and irritated moved behind his composed face. The iron-gray elder struck her desk for order. Docket 1 resumed. Bloodline verification under provisional ward right. Docket 2. Jurisdiction challenge. All parties will keep argument to evidentiary standards. Ryra positioned Olivia at the designated ward marker on the floor, close enough that the tether line remained loose. Stay on this seal unless I tell you otherwise, she said under her breath. Copy. Varkesh began with polished restraint. He questioned scan integrity while implying sabotage, questioned labor sector oversight while implying contamination, questioned whether a human technician could comprehend the legal consequences of his own genome. His language was clean, his contempt deniable. Olivia answered only when addressed, concise and procedural as instructed. Name, shift assignment, scan location, chain of custody request. No extra narrative, no bait. Then Varkesh widened the frame. Given instability indicators and command conflicts already demonstrated, I move for immediate closed session ruling with reduced attendance under security exception. Murmurs moved through the tiers. A closed session would shrink witnesses and let narrative control consolidate fast. Ryra stepped forward, gauntlet hand resting on the edge of her desk. Security exception requires active threat evidence, she said. Present it. Varkesh touched his panel. Threat evidence will be apparent once chamber environment is secured. Olivia felt the hair rise on his arms before he found the cause. The air handler's background note had shifted half a tone lower, subtle enough that non-technical ears might miss it. He listened harder. Supply fans were ramping in asynchronous pulses, not the smooth modulation tied to occupancy load. He glanced up at the vent lattice above the elder tiers and saw a faint haze in the light beam near the eastern duct, barely there, then gone. His stomach tightened. He leaned toward Ryra, voice barely above breath. Your chamber HVAC just changed mode. She did not look at him. Can you confirm fault or command event? Not from here, but that rhythm is wrong. At the same moment, Elder Sorev frowned at her own panel. I am receiving a life support advisory. Varkesh lifted his head as if surprised by timing he had not anticipated so precisely. As I stated, threat evidence. The hall doors slammed shut with a synchronized hydraulic impact that shook dust from the ceiling ribs. Magnetic locks engaged, 1, 2, 3 in fast sequence. A translucent security field flashed across each exit and settled into opaque blue. Attendants startled. One clerk dropped a tablet. Voices rose, clipped, and alarmed. The chamber AI spoke over everything in calm protocol tone. Environmental containment initiated. Please remain at your assigned positions. Sedation safeguard may deploy pending atmospheric deviation. Sedation. Olivia looked at the nearest wall readout and caught the numbers climbing. Trace compounds at 0.4 parts per million, then 0.9, then 1.3. Flagged in yellow under a name he recognized from medbay maintenance logs as a fast-acting anesthetic aerosol used for riot control in predator wards. Ryra's gauntlet pinged against his tether band as both their pulses spiked. She snapped to command voice. Override containment. Code Core 7. The AI answered, override denied. Command lattice priority supersedes local. Varkesh spread his hands with practiced regret. Standard protocol in uncertain bio-events. We protect the elders first. By gassing them. Ryra's words came low and lethal. By preventing escalation. A coughing fit broke from one of the lower-tier clerks. Another elder pressed a cloth to her mouth. Panic threatened the edges of the room, not loud yet, but moving. Olivia stepped off the ward marker without waiting for permission, drawn toward the nearest service panel by instinct older than court etiquette. Taryn moved to block him. Ryra cut in. Let him work, she said. Taryn shifted instantly and cleared the path. Olivia dropped to one knee at the panel junction, popped the cover with his driver, and scanned the manifold controls. Someone had locked out local dampers and hard-routed airflow through a secondary line marked ceremonial heat exchange, a line never meant to carry active filtration load. Smart sabotage, legal on paper as a security rewrote, lethal in effect when combined with aerosol feed. Ryra, he called, eyes on wiring. This isn't random. It's packeted through command lattice with manual lock pins. I can bleed the gas if I get pressure into the heat vent and break the loop. How long? 2 minutes if the vent doesn't shear. You have 90 seconds before elders lose coherence. Then 90. By the first week of dawn cycle hearings, the station would probably rewrite this entire morning into sterile minutes and annex codes, but right now it was only steel, breath, and choices. Olivia yanked 2 conduit pins from his belt, stripped insulation with his cutter, and jammed the first bridge into the manifold override contacts. A spark jumped and bit his knuckle. He ignored it. Behind him, voices blurred into commands, objections, coughing, someone invoking protocol 3 times in a row as if repetition could make air breathable. Ryra stepped to the center ring, drew herself to full height, and addressed the dais with her gauntlet hand raised like a signal flare. Elders witness this. Containment has been weaponized. I invoke combat jurisdiction challenge against Adjudicator Varkesh under Pack Code Red Talon, Section 4. Keep your eyes open and your records live. Varkesh barked. Challenge invalid during security lock. Elder Sorev slammed her desk. Noted and disputed. Continue record. Olivia drove the second pin home, rerouted pressure, and felt the manifold shudder as the ceremonial vent line took load it had never been designed to bear. Metal screamed through the walls. The room's haze thinned by a fraction, then thickened, then began to drift toward the high exhaust with reluctant momentum. Not enough. Not yet. But moving. His wristband vibrated hard with an incoming packet flood. He looked up to the nearest projection surface as Ryra shouted, Olivia, vault feed, now. He ripped his slate from his pocket, hard-linked it to the panel port, and pushed the tamper log he had just captured into chamber display permissions. For one breath, the screen glitched, code scattering like broken glass. Then, command signatures resolved in brutal clarity across the vault dome, tagged with origin chain and authority stamp. The top authorization line carried Varkesh's office key. Silence hit the chamber first, a stunned vacuum where coughing and legal posturing had been, and then sound crashed back in all at once. Elders shouting for record freeze, attendants calling med protocols, Varkesh's clerks talking over each other as the vault dome scrolled his authorization string in white letters too large to disown. Varkesh recovered faster than most men would have. Forged relay, he said, voice still carrying. A maintenance worker with panel access and a compromised commander can manufacture packet trails in under a minute. Seal that display. Olivia stayed on one knee at the open manifold, one hand braced on the hot plating, while the rerouted vent screamed above him. Then, pull full lattice provenance from root and prove it, he shot back. Checksum chain is visible. You taught your sabotage to sign its own name. Rhyra moved before Varkesh could build another procedural wall. She stepped into the central ring, gauntlet hand raised, and spoke with the exact cadence of code, each word dropping into the chamber AI as command data rather than rhetoric. Challenge formalized under Red Talon. Request immediate independent verification by Elder Triad and Neutral Systems Clerk. Request medical masks for all seated principals. Request detention hold on Adjudicator Varkesh pending result. The iron-gray elder struck her desk hard enough to make the water vial jump. Granted in sequence. Clerk Niral, pull root chain now. Sorev, with me for Triad. Marshals, masks. The hall shifted from argument to emergency procedure. Terran and 2 other marshals snapped breather masks across elder desks with practiced speed. A clerk tried to hand one to Varkesh. The adjudicator slapped it away, still speaking into his console, trying to flood channels faster than the room could breathe. Rhyra caught his wrist mid-gesture, not violent, immovable. Hands visible, she said. Remove yourself. You lost command priority when you triggered sedation in a full convocation chamber. His eyes flashed toward the opaque exits, calculating distance, personnel, odds. He did not run. Men like him preferred the kill done by paperwork. Olivia kept working the manifold while the concentration numbers on the wall finally began to fall. 1.3, 1.0, 0.8. He used his jacket sleeve to shield his mouth from the last thin haze and drove a manual wedge into the ceremonial vent lever to keep flow open. The lever shook against his palm like an angry engine. He rode it down until it steadied. Atmosphere trending safe, the chamber AI announced. Sedation threshold no longer escalating. Across the ring, Clerk Niral's projection split into 3 panes: origin key, root lattice, and command timestamp. Every pane pointed to Varkesh's office cluster, then 1 layer deeper to his personal authorization spindle. No spoof artifacts, no route contamination. Clean, ugly truth. Niral swallowed and read it into record anyway. Tamper packet authenticated. Security reroute and aerosol release command issued from Adjudicator Varkesh primary key at 055812 station, with manual lock pin set against local override. Independent checksum matches. No one spoke for a beat. Then Elder Sorev turned toward Varkesh with naked contempt. You attempted a closed ruling by incapacitating this chamber. Varkesh's composure finally cracked at the edges. I prevented lineage corruption and command capture. Extraordinary threats require— Enough, the iron-gray elder said. Marshals. Null field restraints came out in matte black loops. Varkesh tried one last appeal to process, but this time process belonged to other hands. Terran and the honor guards bound his wrists, then his elbows, the field humming low as it killed his access links. One of his clerks burst into tears. The other stood rigid, eyes fixed ahead, as if still waiting for permission to react. Rhyra released a breath Olivia had not heard her holding. She glanced down at him by the manifold, then at the sparking panel, where his slate remained hard-linked and transmitting logs. Can you secure that line? She asked. Yeah. He pulled the cable, sealed the panel, and held up the slate. Its cracked corner bled static, but the data file was intact and mirrored to Chamber Vault. Evidence copy on local and archive. Submit both. He crossed to the clerk table, passed the slate and panel capture under witness scan, and watched the clerk seal them in a transparent evidence sleeve with timecode and his name. Physical item resolved. He patted his jacket pocket on reflex and felt the 2 original red print slips still there, damp with sweat. He handed those over too. "These started it," he said. The clerk logged each slip, then gave him a receipt wafer. Chain accepted. By the time the chamber locks disengaged, 20 minutes had passed since the first oxygen warning, and the room smelled like exhausted filters, fierce sweat, and hot electronics rather than cedar ritual. Med staff moved in with carts and quiet authority. No one had collapsed. No one had been carried out. That fact landed in Olivia's chest with delayed force. The adjudication resumed because institution survived by naming chaos and filing it. Elders convened at reduced volume, while Varkesh stood restrained between two guards, no longer center of gravity. Ryra remained at Olivia's side through every ruling. The verdict sequence came in clipped declarations. Varkesh was stripped of adjudicator rank, removed from purity law authority, and sentenced to frontier labor oversight under permanent audit with no command lattice privileges. His office's active petitions were frozen pending review. Purity statute 9 enforcement transferred to a mixed oversight panel by temporary emergency order. The chamber clerk read each line while archive drones etched copies into physical and digital record. Then the elders turned to Olivia. "Bloodline marker determination," Sorev said. Independent meta-analysis of Lee Olivia J., including archived war-era triage protocols, finds the 0.99% lupine royal marker is not contamination, graft theft, or falsified lineage. It is a legacy artifact consistent with emergency gene shielding used in mixed species casualty wards during the border retreat. Olivia heard his mother's name before he realized he'd stopped breathing. "Mara Lee Medic Stabilization Corps," Sorev continued, reading from a restored service file projected above the dais. "Deployed in Lupine Sector with provisional kinshield authorization to preserve treatment compatibility in high radiation zones. Transfer status was classified not criminal. Casualty recorded during evacuation of Kelid Corridor triage ship. Honors delayed by sealed docket. Release authorized now." A portrait appeared in the vault dome. Mara in field gear, hair tied back, tired eyes, and a sideways half-smile he wore in his own face without ever seeing it. Under the image sat her citation line and the unit patch he had described. Ryra's hand settled at the back of his elbow, steady and present, as if she knew exactly how hard old grief could strike when it finally had paperwork and witnesses. He cleared his throat twice before sound worked. "She wasn't erased." "No," Sorev said, voice softer than before. "She was buried under secrecy and negligence. That record has now been corrected." Thread closed, not happily but cleanly. After the ruling, clerks processed disposition on practical matters. The restraint band was removed from Olivia's wrist and tagged inactive. His keycard was returned. His tools came back in a clear pouch after contamination scan. One conduit pin was listed as consumed in emergency repair, one retained in the manifold until maintenance could replace the lever assembly. The chamber requested a systems report on the pressure flutter he had noted in the upper corridor earlier. He filed it on the spot and marked it for priority inspection. Strange detail noted and acted on. At 0714 station, while med crews cleared the last aerosol canister, Olivia received a monitored comm ping from deck operations. Foreman Dax's face appeared on a side panel, rough and sleep-deprived, and trying not to look worried in front of aristocrats. "You alive?" Dax asked. Olivia leaned toward the panel. "Yeah," Dax grunted. "Good. Your valve rounds got covered, your bench drawer's still locked, and HR says I can't dock you for missing shift during involuntary bloodline litigation. First useful sentence HR ever sent me." Olivia laughed once, brittle and real. "Put it in a frame." Dax's eyes flicked to Ryra, to the elders, to the restrained former adjudicator in the background. He chose his words carefully. You need me to come up there? Olivia looked at the room, then back at him. No, but I'm still taking you up on the coffee debt. Make it 2 months, Dax said, and cut the call before emotion got public. When the chamber finally recessed for post-incident cleaning, Ryra asked Olivia to walk with her to a smaller council room off the main corridor. No guards inside, only one recorder drone and a narrow window looking down toward the industrial rings. From this height, maintenance decks were a band of dull lights and moving machinery, ugly and essential. Ryra stood by the window, repaired gauntlet quiet, posture no longer ceremonial. Elders approved a voluntary appointment, she said. Interspecies systems liaison, joint authority between command and operations. You would audit cross-caste infrastructure, monitor protocol abuse vectors, and report directly to mixed council, not to any single office. You may refuse. Olivia rubbed the fresh skin mark where the restraint band had been. Refusal means back to Deck 9 and pretending this morning didn't happen. It means anonymity if you still want it. He let that sit. He had wanted quiet for years. Quiet had turned out to be expensive and brittle. What's the catch? Visibility. Enemies with better tailoring. More meetings than any sane mechanic deserves. A pause then, more personal, and one additional request from me. He waited. Accord season begins in 12 days, she said. I need a pack engineer consort recognized under court and command law, someone I trust in rooms where systems fail at convenient moments. The role is contractual, revocable, and explicit about autonomy. No one owns you. No one drafts your genome. You stand at my side because you choose to, and because you are very good at keeping people breathing when protocol gets theatrical. He barked a laugh under his breath. That is the least romantic proposal in station history. Her mouth moved, almost a smile. It is the most honest one I can offer. He looked out through the narrow window to the ring below, where work crews were already replacing a failed panel near a freight spine. Tiny figures in orange, moving with the same stubborn competence that had built his whole life. Then he looked back at her. Okay, he said. I accept the liaison post, and the consort contract, with clauses I get to read sober and twice. Agreed. Also, I keep my toolkit. I would be alarmed if you did not. They sealed it with a formal wrist clasp. Gauntlet to grease-scarred hand, equal pressure. No spectacle. No accident. Chosen future in clear terms. An hour later, as station daylight cycled to full and crews vented the last sedation residue from convocation ducts, Olivia stood beside Ryra on the upper transit balcony while a clerk read the public notice into the sector feed. Varkesh removed, purity enforcement restructured, Mara Lee's honors restored. Olivia Lee appointed by consent. Ward Corps recognized under revised covenant practice. The words carried down through cedar corridors and industrial vents alike, into luxury suites and maintenance bays, into every place where people lived with systems they did not fully trust. Ryra glanced at him as the notice ended. You understand this will stay complicated. Yeah, he said, watching the cinder ring turn. Steel and light and stubborn life locked together. Complicated I can repair.